There we go. It is 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and we are the POP Baking Club. And we are making biscotti tonight, a chocolate biscotti. I've made a ton. It comes out of the Advanced Bread and Pastry, out of the Culinary Institute of America's textbook by Michael Suaz. It is a recipe that is designed to be scaled up and down indefinitely. The original recipe is a 10-pound batch, and it's meant for an industrial setting. And that's not a bad thing. That means you're gonna get consistency, and it's going to work for you in terms of ease of putting it together, reliability of the bake, and then a really good storage. But for those of you who don't know, my name's Kathleen. I am a certified executive pastry chef. As we talk about time, temperature, moisture, emulsification, coagulation, cohesion, these things affect almost every single recipe that we make. And the biscotti is no different. You will notice as I'm making it that we start to get a breaking of the emulsion and how we bring it back together. We don't want to overwork gluten because you're going to dry out the biscotti, so you don't want it to be too tough. However, it has a lot of fat in it and sugar, which are all tenderizers. The fat isn't just the butter either. It's almond flour and cocoa powder, which mine has real cocoa butter in it, which is fat. So there's a lot of these things that live inside of our ingredients that affect the final outcome, and they're different in every recipe. So we want to highlight those things. Okay, let me do a fit check real quick. I wear my work Carhartt overalls, and I keep my clothes tight so they don't get caught in any equipment. I wear kitchen clogs and a clean white $5 apron every time I work. The apron is not for wiping your hands on or for hanging towels from the ties. It is to keep your clothes clean, and it signifies how you work. Because if you have a dirty apron, it kind of says a lot about everything that you do. It shows how you work. I have short fingernails, no nail polish, no jewelry, minimal makeup. My glasses are driving me crazy and I pull my hair back. So tonight we're doing a biscotti, and it is out of a textbook, and I often recommend that you use textbooks instead of recipe books. Textbooks are designed to give you technical sections that are unparalleled. They give you charts that even will talk about if this happened, this might be the cause. They are so well written, and if you actually look at the people who write the books, they teach at the San Francisco Baking Institute, at the Culinary Institute of America. They are the best of the best. And so it isn't silly to expect a textbook to give you a lot of information. And what you need is how baking works, not just a recipe. So tonight we're using a biscotti recipe, and I took its original form out of the textbook, and it's all in grams, which is wonderful. It's actually in kilos, because the original recipe is a 10-pound recipe. I input it into the formulator, which lives at the Practice of Pastry. And these are our ingredients, and I usually order them in the order in which I use them. So we're gonna start with the creamy method, butter and sucrose, down to egg, vanilla. This recipe uses bread flour, which is King Arthur's bread flour is 12.7% protein, so it's a little bit higher than AP, around 11.7. And we need a little bit stronger gluten structure because we're adding a lot of sugar and fat. And we have almond flour, cocoa powder, baking powder, salt, and chocolate. I am using chocolate chips tonight, but you are welcome to use chopped chocolate or any kind of chocolate that you want to add. I use the chocolate chips to save money, and I didn't want to waste my expensive new chocolate on this because I think the flavor is so well supported by the biscotti that when you look at where you want to spend your money, that is the decision I made, but you can make a decision for yourself and your pocketbook. But on here we have the standard recipe, and my conversion is at 45%. So this is our recipe tonight, and these are the numbers that I'll be scaling, and these are our baker's percentage. Always, our flour is 100%. Everything is built around the flour in this recipe. These are my notes. They live on Substack. And as you can see, there's the history, and I go all the way through. When I give this lecture and the demo, I will talk about as many things as I can think of and remember. The wonderful thing about these notes is that they get a little more into the science in the specifics, some of which I might forget as we go along, but learning has always meant that all of these different pieces are supposed to come together and support the general learning. So I think that using all of them is going to benefit you more than just one. And there are no notes under the method because I don't add them. I expect people to watch the demos and then to proceed. But if you want to know generally, we are doing the creaming method. All of my ingredients are room temperature. Every now and then I might have to run into the kitchen because I do have the biscotti in different stages all over the place. And the first stage is having them in my scalings, which is where we will start. And then I have two that I baked. This one is narrower and it is cooling, and I rushed the slicing of the first one, and it wasn't even cool. So you should never slice them when they're cool or warm. A lot of this stuff that I do is kind of not best practices, but we do our best. For the format, if you have the recipe, it's on my link tree. You're gonna look at the 45% conversion, and I am just gonna go through and confirm that I have all of my ingredients at the right weight. 158 grams of butter, room temperature, unsalted. Sucrose, which is table sugar, at 456. And you can see just by looking at this, the ratio of butter to sucrose. It tells you a lot about this recipe to start with. The egg is 304 grams, scaled. Vanilla is 25 grams. That is a lot. That is quite a bit. And you don't just look at the amount, even though 25 grams is a lot. It's 4%. Typically, you're between 1.5 and 2.5 at the highest on vanilla, but this one is really high. And then we have bread flour, and it's in two different containers. Generally, a large deli cup holds 500 grams, and that's what's in here. I need 633, so I have 133 in here. These go together. Almond flour you can make if you have raw blanched almonds. You don't want to turn them into butter, but I buy it. It gives you a nice even grain, and it's fine ground. 127 grams of almond flour. Cocoa powder, 92 grams. And look at this, 127 squished in there and 92. This is how volume is so different. You know, the almond flour is much fluffier. Baking powder is 15.8, and I do use a mini scale, and I can get 15.8 grams. You don't want to estimate. The salt is 9.5 grams. This is fine sea salt. And it's 1.5%. So this is a pretty average amount of salt. And then the chocolate chips are 35%, which is kind of high, 221 grams, and these are a 60% Ghirardelli, which I have to tell you, after eating the Valrhona that I bought recently, I'm not enjoying the Ghirardelli chips quite as much. So this is gonna be the creaming method, and the reason I like working with these deli cups, one reason of many, is I can put these together. This is the sugar and the butter that are going to be creamed. And then I'm gonna add the vanilla and the egg next. So physically, I know these are together, and that helps me not make a mistake. The chocolate's just gonna go over here, I know it's last, but all of these dries are going to be sifted together, and I am going to whisk them together. So I'm gonna start with the room temperature butter. I always take off the labels and save them. That way, if I run into a problem, I can backtrack. This room temperature butter, let me get a spatula, and I'm gonna start the butter first. And it's a little cold because my room is cold, because it's cold here. So I'm gonna watch it. If I need to warm up the bowl, I can do it with a warm towel or with a torch, which is how I will do it. So you start the butter and then you add the sucrose. Normally when you make a cookie, it's not gonna be like this much sucrose with that little butter. That's a stark difference, and the reason is the structure from this cookie is coming from two places. It's coming a little bit from the egg, not so much from the flour, not from the gluten. The egg proteins are offering a lot of structure, and then the sugar comes in during the second bake. So we have a first bake and a second bake. In the first bake, your sucrose melts, and it melts in the water that lives inside of the egg, and most of the water lives in the egg white. And so that sucrose starts to dissolve into the egg white. And then when you bake it a second time, the sucrose turns into a type of glass. Just like if you melt sugar and pour it onto a countertop and you can lift it up and it looks like glass, it's no longer crystallized. So it's different, and that glass structure is what gives this biscotti its texture and its structure, which is nice. All right, so let me open these things and get ready. Basically, when your butter is too cold, this is exactly what happens, okay? You can even see how it stays darker in the center and the outside is a little lighter in color, and it does this. We need to get the butter moving around, and the way to do it is not to put it on high. Butter is an emulsion, and when it is a beautiful natural emulsion of water and fat, and when you bang on it with the paddle, you can knock out that emulsion and end up with water escaping, which is not good. So we want to maintain the emulsion. We want to be gentle and treat it really nice, but we also want to get it, aerate it just a little bit. We're not going to over aerate this because air and fluffiness is not what we want out of the biscotti. I am checking on the biscotti that I started earlier, and I knew with the timing that I would have to dry some so I can show you how to use them when they're done baking. But let's see. This guy was not baked enough, so I stuck him back in. But these are starting to dry out, and what I'm doing is sticking my finger in here, and you can kind of see these were underbaked because I was rushing. Ends up being darker in the center where it's wetter, and I'm just going to move these around a little bit. But when I stick my fingernail in there, I shouldn't get that much give. It's way too soft. So we're going to let them stay in and get a little bit drier. There's no rush yet. We'll do 15 minutes. So I made this dough yesterday, and it's been in the refrigerator overnight. And then you bake it in bulk at a higher temperature, let it cool all the way, slice it with a serrated knife on the bias, lay them down, bake them at a lower temperature, flip them over once that one side is dry, because the underside isn't going to dry out. Flip them all over, dry them out, and then you have a beautiful biscotti. One that shouldn't be brittle and so hard that it's unenjoyable. It should be just the right texture. All right, so I am going to have to warm this up. You want your butter to be plastic enough, flexible enough to be able to take on air. Again, we don't want a lot, but if we have none, that's not good either. And these sucrose particles are sharp, and they're going to cut little holes in the butter that become air cells, which will open up and give us that open crumb that you see in a cake. But if it's too cold, it won't do that. I'm going to warm up my bowl. Even though I haven't added any sugar yet, I don't want to melt the butter. I just want to loosen it up. You can tell I turned up the speed just a little bit, but we never really want to go more than medium. I'm going to add 1/3 of the sucrose and let it go. I'm going to take all my dry ingredients, and instead of running them through a tammy or a sifter, I'm going to put them in a bowl, and I'm going to sift them with a whisk. I'm going to incorporate them. The reason you sift, there's two reasons. One is to add a little bit of air. Maybe everything that you're using has become compressed, and you need to make it a little bit lighter. The other reason, and the reason we're doing it, is because we want a little bit of cohesion. And if I just started adding different ingredients to the bowl, I was like, here's the baking powder, here's the salt, here's the cocoa powder, then I'm not going to get a cohesive mixture as quickly. So then I'm going to have to work on that in the bowl, which means I have to mix it longer. So it's somewhat of a head start. That's what I'm doing. So I'm going to take a bowl, plastic bowl. I'm going to put the bread flour. I have 2 bread flours because only 500 grams fits in my large dose of baking powder. That is the almond flour. This is the salt. And this is the cocoa powders. Lovely Dutch process cocoa powder, which can get lumpy. Having almond powder in here is really nice because it has a bit of a grit, so it helps to break up those clumps. If everything in here were very lightweight and delicate, that wouldn't happen. Almond powder can gather a lot of moisture, and they're larger chunks, larger particles than the flour. So we'll see. I see some, you can see the cocoa powder lumps, and so we'll see how they come out. If I want, I can still run this through a tammy. See how there are some lumps in here. So I think I might need to do that, so bad on me. Live and learn. All right, this is how I do it. And my butter still is pretty cold. I'll show you what's going on in the bowl. You can see how cold it is. That is cold butter. That is not taking on air. It isn't creaming, so I'm gonna warm it up. All right, let's see how this works when I warm up the bowl. We don't want it on high. This is a medium to medium high. Even then, when I touch the bowl, it is a little bit cold. So we want to get that in there. If I move on without this aerating a tiny bit, then the next step won't be at its maximum potential. So I am going to run this is how I do it. Because this is not going to go in here neatly, so I am going to put my dries onto a parchment. Move these out of the way, make some room. What I do is pick up my dries like this, and I'm gonna put it in the tammy. There we go. You can reuse your parchment, but be careful. This does have nuts in it if you have any nut allergies. This is still softening. I'm gonna turn it up just a little bit, and then I am going to sift my dries. And you can see I have definite cocoa powder pieces. Cocoa powder is hygroscopic, and there's no better example than seeing all these pieces in here. They have taken up the moisture in the air. And so when you add cocoa powder to something like this biscotti, it's also hygroscopic. It's going to be competing for the moisture just like your sugar and your flour does, and it will help stabilize your biscotti later. So I know there's some chunks here, but it's safe for me to add them back. Clean this off. And I have my dries ready to go. I can pull this in like that. It's nice and clean. I am ready later to add the dries to this without spilling. So let me explain to you why it is so important that this is warm, okay? I am going to be adding all of this and the vanilla to this. If this is cold and not loose and stretchy, and it's not going to go like this with the egg, they're going to do this. Emulsifying means that two things, that either because of the high volume of one thing to the other, or the temperature, or one is water and one is fat, is not going to come together. So I'm gonna warm this up one last time, because our main goal is to emulsify really nicely when we add the eggs. Because when we first add them, we are going to get chunks. It's going to be all coagulated. It's not going to look pretty. But if we take our time and add a little bit of egg at a time, we will get a really nice cohesive mix before we start adding the dries. Now this isn't going to turn into the kind of butter and sugar where they're more equal, 50-50. Sucrose is at 72% and the butter is at 25%. 72 and 25. So this is never going to get as light and fluffy as, let's say, a typical chocolate chip cookie mix. On top of that, we're adding 40% baker's percentage of egg. So what I want to do is I'm going to add the first amount, the third of the egg. And we all know what this looks like, but I'll show you real quick. It's actually doing okay. That's actually quite nice. But I'm gonna go ahead and scrape it, and then I'm gonna add a little bit more while you watch, and then we'll give the camera back. So I'm gonna scrape the bottom. The scraping is more gentle than keeping the mixer going. And going faster with the mixer is not better, ever. Go and slow, take your time, have patience. All right, so I'm gonna add a little more egg. It's 2 yolks. All right, so you saw immediately what's around the edges is not incorporated, but the center is starting to get there. But let's see. We want to see what a broken emulsion looks like. And you can see it right there. Those are those lumps. And that's how the mix looks. But through patience and time, I'm going to get this to come together. I'm going to scrape the edges. That helps. I'm not over mixing that way. Scrape the bottom. and it's loosening up, and it actually looks really good. When I made this yesterday, it took a little bit longer to come together. Now is the time to add the vanilla, so I will add it right before I add the rest of the egg. But I am never going to move on to adding the dry ingredients until this is emulsified. That might mean that I need to do it by hand. It might mean that I need to warm up the bowl. And it might mean that I just need to keep this moving for a little while longer. So I'm gonna put the vanilla in. This is vanilla bean paste, which I love. You can use extract. If you want to add liqueurs and other flavors, you need to be very careful on this particular recipe in terms of how it's going to change it and possibly throw it out of balance. So if you're looking to do a different kind of biscotti that has amaretto or liqueurs in it or other liquids, you are going to have to find a different formula. That doesn't mean you can't swap vanilla extract for the vanilla bean paste. You can. So I'm going to go a little while longer before I add the last egg. So whenever you get the urge to dump everything in, you're in a hurry, just remember that the ingredients don't care that you're in a hurry or that your kitchen is cold. The ingredients are going to ingredient. They're going to do what they naturally do. So your job is to observe and then respond. And so that's what I'm doing. It's still very coagulated. And by very, I mean, it's not like it's not coming together, but there are little chunks all around. So we don't want that. We want it to be very smooth. That looks pretty good, but I can still see a little. So I'm gonna add the last egg. And there is no gluten in here. I can't really overwork this because we aren't talking about gluten, but I could over aerate it, but I'm most likely to do that just by moving too quickly. So we're not, we're doing a nice medium speed. Biscotti, like I said, is all about a controlled dry. You're controlling the ingredients to give you this perfect balance of moisture, and then through other ingredients like the chemical leavener, which is the baking powder, it's gonna give you just enough lift so that that moisture can escape, but not so much that you get puff that is out of control. So we want a very controlled bake, hydration. All of these things are going to give us a biscotti, even after we bake it dry, that bends when you bite it, that holds its shape when you dip it in a hot cup of coffee or tea. It does all of the things that you want it to do, including holds up really nice if you want to dip it in chocolate or sprinkle it, which I'm going to do later, or bag it and make it beautiful. And often you'll see a lot of biscotti in a jar near the point of purchase at a bakery, and you can buy them one at a time. You can make them teeny tiny and little small, and you can make them bigger. So they're really, really flexible in terms of the desired outcome and what you want to do with them. So I'm gonna leave this on. I'm gonna scrape it real quick, and then we'll go check the cookies in the kitchen. I think this is a temperature thing, so I am going to come back and use my torch, because at this point I could whip these all night and it won't come together. So it's gonna come down to temperature. My rule is to always have 2 mitts. It's the safest. Try to follow my own rules. So when I touch this cookie, it's pretty dry. So what I'm gonna do, and I don't normally leave the oven open, but it's on a low temp, we're good. I'm gonna flip these. Ooh. And then they're gonna go back in the oven and continue to dry out. You do not want to get the texture and structure you're looking for through the bake. You want to do it through a good recipe and through a really good mix. You want to follow all the steps so you end up with a really good product, because you can't fix something if it's structurally or foundationally off. So I'm going to put this on for 15 minutes. So I'm going to grab this biscotti baby right here. I need this guy to cool. I did not bake it long enough earlier, which is not good. You do not want to under bake a biscotti and then try to dry it out later. You need to give it a really good head start. All right, so it's still a little coagulated. So I'm gonna put this over here so I might be able to cut it. It needs to get completely cool. All right, let me show you what it looks like so you know what I'm doing, and then I'm going to take my torch, and I think it's gonna come right together. Let me show you what it looks like now, just so you know exactly what I'm talking about. If you see that your mix looks like that, those are little unemulsified pieces of your batter. So we are going to get that together. I just want to make sure that you know what I'm talking about. All right, here we go. All right, so between the moving around of the paddle and the warming up of the bowl, we should get a good result. We should already see a big difference, and I do. It's not perfect, but it's getting there. And the thing is, when you paddle things, when you turn dough, when you move things around, you're redistributing temperature. And I think I could actually use the heat source a little bit longer, so that's what I'm gonna do. Let me do it one more time. So let me take a look at it. Yep, a little bit more, and then we should be there. And it feels cold. That's how cold it is where I live. I'm going to use a low flame just to sort of help it along. You don't want this on one part of your bowl. It's not good for it. I really want to knock it cold off. That's what I'm talking about here. So emulsification is everything. Actually, this is the longest, slowest part of this portion of the baking, or of the mixing. Once we get this together, it kind of moves along quickly. And typically, you won't have this sort of problem if your ingredients start out really nice and warmer places. I would say, even with the heat on, this place might be around 65 degrees, so that's just too cold Fahrenheit. All right, I'm gonna give it another minute here. We're going to add the dries in thirds. And I want to move pretty quickly. I don't want to take a long time adding these in, and I don't want to work the gluten. I don't want to keep mixing after I add, just until cohesion. So as always, in thirds, your first addition is the largest. It's a little more than a third. And your last one should be the least. The first two inclusions of your flours, you can leave streaks. It doesn't need to be all the way together, but when you do your last, you must confirm with the spatula that everything is off the bottom, that there are no streaks, and that it's fully incorporated. Those streaks will be weak spots, and they will show up in the bake, and so we want to be very, very careful that we don't end up with those. And then our chocolate will go in at the very end, and you can either fold it in or put it in and let the paddle bring it around, and it's a pretty stiff dough, so that's what I would recommend. When you add the dries as well, it's going to help bring this together. I'm going to scrape it, and then I'm going to add some of the dries. Yeah, this is going to be a big batch. So if you are making this, I think with the fact that it's in grams, you can bring it down to a much smaller batch. 5 pounds typically will fit into a 4.5 quart mixer. So if you go closer to 3, you'll have a manageable batch. So I'm going to lift up my dries, and I'm going to turn this way down. I'm going to add a third, and these are everything mixed together. Almond flour, cocoa powder, bread flour, baking powder, salt. Is that all? Now I'm going to add the next one. And the smallest inclusion will be the last one. You can hear it working, it's getting thicker. And I'm going to stop it, and I'm going to scrape it. That's why going on low is really important. So it's loose. It's going to get a lot stiffer with the last inclusion. So the reason I comment on how this looks is, as you observe, as you talk to yourself, be looking at things like the texture. How viscous is the dough? Is it sticking to the edges of the bowl? This is very stiff. So you can see it's already stiff like that, and I still have more to add. So I'm going to tilt the bowl, and as you can see, there's butter at the bottom. So I want to flip this over, bring the butter from the bottom to the top, and then I'll put it back on the paddle. This way, if you're just running the paddle, you're going to overwork the gluten. But if you use a spatula, that will help. Put this back on. I'm just going to paddle it a sec, and then I'm going to add the last dry, and then we're good to go. Scrape, scrape. Okay, put it on low, and then I'm going to add the last ingredient. Stop it, lift it up. Drop some of this down. I can scrape. You can see there's a lot still that's dry on the edges. This is more of a stiff spatula, so a stiff spatula or even a bowl scraper works well. And I want to take the edges and get everything down and in, and then I pull the batter away and I look underneath, and it actually looks pretty good. I will show you. You can see the bottom is pretty clean. So that's good. There's nothing unusual that's separated. Now, even at this stage, I can see a little bit of flour, just a little bit, but instead of over mixing, I'm gonna go ahead and add the chocolate chips. I use the 60%. You can use darker or lighter. You can kind of do whatever you want. But these chips are sort of an interrupter. When you go to slice these, it makes it so that your knife will go through without a dense gluten matrix. Like you made it so tight that there's no ease. And this will also make it nicer on the tooth, because they do, obviously, chocolate chips are meant to soften up and then re-solidify a little bit softer than they started. And that is really nice in a biscotti. And again, if you want to do a traditional style with nuts and different things, you can substitute for the chocolate chip nuts, but you want to make sure that they are toasted well, they are a good size. You might even want to play with the percentage just a little bit. All right, so here we go. I'm going to take all of my ingredients. All right, so I'm going to watch this and just get my chocolate chips incorporated. It doesn't take much. Now, I took this exact mix and made 3 different loaves, but I'm going to make 1 loaf so that you can see how I do it, and then you can make smaller loaves. I would divide it into 3. You can do whatever you want. If you want little 3-inch small ones, or you want longer 6 or 7-inch biscotti, you can decide now. It comes down to when you divide your dough, how much you want on one plank. And even then you can bake it and cut it in half. This we could slice this way, or we can slice it down the middle and make minis. Totally up to us. So there are a lot of stages where you get to make choices. Okay, so I'm gonna get rid of my mixer, move it out of the way. This dough is not meant to be put in the freezer until it's been baked once. So tonight, I recommend rolling it out between plastic, chilling it overnight, and then baking it next day. And then at that point, you can bake it and cool it and wrap it and put it in the freezer. Don't freeze the raw dough, but you can freeze them after their first bake, which is really helpful in production. All right, let me get some plastic. So this is messy. It's a beautiful, beautiful batter. Dark, rich, easy to handle. It's dryish, it's sticky, but it comes off really nicely. I actually think I'll do 2 rolls. I have plastic wrap. I buy this from Restaurant Depot. I like to get a 12-inch, an 18, and a 24. I actually use less plastic that way because I have the size that I need. So I'm gonna prepare the plastic on the table. And you can weigh this out if you want. If you are running a business, I absolutely would, no question. All right, let's go check our guys and we'll come back and get this wrapped up nicely. Let's take a look here at what we have. You have to touch them to know if they're done. I can smell, they smell like they're getting there. And again, this dark spot in the center is a result of them being underbaked. So that's not ideal, but we'll talk more about that when I cut the next thing. So these are not dry enough. They're getting there though. I'm gonna give them 5 minutes. My fingernail barely goes into them. So as I said, this batter is very stiff, so I might end up using a bowl scraper, but I'm gonna start using gravity. Very strong dough. I'm gonna use the bowl scraper, the round part. This is too hard to get out. Much faster, it just gets on my hands. All right, so I'm gonna eyeball it. This is great because you can scrape every little bit out very easily. All right. Once I wrap this up, it can't go in the freezer. It's going to have to go into the refrigerator. And then once I give it its first bulk bake, I can freeze it, double wrap it. When you use plastic like this, you can use it like your hands. And first of all, I'm going to get it into a general shape that I need it to be, the length and the width. I'm going to show you how I keep it in shape. Just by using the plastic as a tool. Okay, so it's not even, but here's what you do. This is so great. In order to make a nice rectangle, I'm going to take the plastic and I am going to fold it where I want this line to be. Not right up to it. And then I'm going to take this and do the same thing if I want this to be about here. So when I pull this, I'm not pulling it tight, I'm leaving room. So when I take this and I flip it over, this is what it looks like. But because I folded it, there is a little bit of structure here now to make it only go so far. And on top of that, I can get it even right into the corners. You can do this with acetate sheets, you can do it with parchment, and some things are way easier than plastic, and you can see how great it looks. I'll put it like this. I can take my hands and make it a little thicker, a little tighter. And after it's been in the refrigerator, maybe 20 minutes, if I want to strengthen it up a little bit, shape it up a little bit more, I can. And to be even more precise, we can use bench knives to get it nice and sharp. So there we go. So I'm gonna do that one more time. You can see it's uneven, and that's okay. I'm gonna pay attention to getting that line straight and this line straight. And I don't want to give it too much room. And then straighten it out and keep those corners where I want them to be. Straighten it out. And just think about when you push the dough into the corners, that's the limitation. All right, roll this into the corners. Because this is going to be baked tomorrow, I am not going to double wrap it. But if you have any holes in it, which might happen, you're definitely going to want to double wrap it. We don't want parts of it drying out. Okay, so I'm gonna place this on here. It's a little thin, it's a little too thin. Yes, you want it about 1/2 inch thick, but maybe more. So if you start out with it a little bit more like this, it will get skinnier. And it's gonna puff up a little bit. I just wanna give it a little more height. All right, so this is gonna go in the refrigerator. If you're in a kitchen with more than yourself, you wanna add the date and the name of what this product is. I'm gonna put it in my refrigerator. Okay, here we go. These are coming out. I don't even think I need to test them. All right, so we're gonna leave them at 305 because I'm going to put some more in. We're gonna slice some right now, and I'm gonna show you how they go in the oven. So I talked about how you want it to be completely cool. There's a few reasons why. Many are obvious, but because of the chocolate chips, you don't want the chocolate chips to keep you from getting a nice clean slice. We want a really clean slice that is not shredded. Some of that comes down to your mix. Some comes down to how you slice it. So this is the one that I just pulled out of the oven, and because I rebaked it, it's pretty firm. But I'm going to slice it so you can see the difference. And it holds up, it's not bendable. But this one did not get baked longer. I'm concerned it's underbaked, but you can't determine if it's underbaked just out of the oven. You have to let it come. And you'll find signs of doneness. You'll get tuned in and dial it in, but it's pretty firm. Here is my Thermohauser very thin serrated knife. When you slice these, you want them to be on the bias, meaning at about a 40 degree angle. So instead of 90 degrees straight, you're gonna go off a little bit. It's gonna give you more surface area for drying. It looks nice. It's a good way to elongate the biscotti. You really need to use a serrated knife. You need to go very quickly. And if this is too soft, you're going to be holding this together. You need to start just by getting some grip with the knife and letting the knife, do not push, let the knife do what it does. So these look dry, so they were not underbaked. So that's the end. This is the butt. So you're really not gonna sell the butt. I like them, but they're not the ones you're going to package. So cut that as thin as you can. They should all be the same width, and you want them to be the same width because it looks nice. You have uniformity, and also they'll dry out more uniform. So I'm gonna go for approximately a 1/2 inch. And if I don't get a lot of crumbling, that's a good sign. So you can see that the inside is a little bit darker. That means it's a little wetter, but not like those other ones. Those were very much underdone. So far, I think these look really nice. Nice shape. This did puff up in the oven a little bit, but once these go in the oven, they aren't gonna puff at all. The structure is already set. The first bake, you get a little bit of the leavening. The lightness is going to make it so that these aren't going to break your teeth. And as I get toward the center where it's thicker, naturally a little bit, they're a little bit softer. So you want the thinnest serrated knife that you can find. You want to let the tool do its don't press saw, because that top part is very fragile. These cracks will break your top apart. And they look really pretty when you can preserve them. And these are very forgiving. If you have problems, you're still going to have beautiful biscotti. And I keep wanting to call them cookies. You know, biscotti is just like a travel cake, just like many, many kinds of breads and things that we've created through history were designed to be given to travelers, to people heading out that were in the military or off to war that needed food that would travel well in their pack. And biscotti not only does not fall apart, but because of its dry nature, lasts a very long time. Because moisture is the problem with degradation. It's the problem with bacteria getting into your food and causing problems. So when you have a dry product like biscotti, you have less of an issue with things going bad. Now you can even go harder on the bias if you like. I'm getting a little bit straight. So let me try to correct here. This one's gonna be a little bit thicker. So the oven, when you do your first bake, is around 350 degrees Fahrenheit. And when you do the second bake, it's around 300. You can alter those numbers. I personally would not use convection. The fan is going to cook the outside, leaving the inside undercooked. And our goal is not, it's just like our chocolate lava cake. We're not under baking a cake to make it lava. We're using a good formula and then baking it properly. And with the biscotti, we're doing exactly the same thing. Okay. So as long as these aren't touching and there's a little bit of airflow, we should get a nice dry on these. I am going to cut the end off just so we can have one extra pretty biscotti. There we go. And then these are going in the oven. All right, I will come back and cut the one that I think, we'll see what happens with it because I can dry those out tonight. Here we are. You can tell the inside is a little bit shiny and it's darker. That is much softer, almost spongy. You can see that I left an imprint. We're gonna dry it out, but we're not gonna make them so dark. They don't taste good. We're not going to dry them out to make them hard. We want a nice, even dry all the way through. And every part of the mixing, every decision about the ingredient, the percentages, and everything is going to give us a nicer finished product. Really even. Now, I'm gonna give these 20 minutes. I think we'll be able to flip them. I'm gonna slice these just to see what they look like. Like I said, normally I don't put it back in the oven, but this was so soft I had to. But I'm gonna make some little guys. I'm gonna slice these a little bit faster, maybe a little harder on the bias, and then you'll see how I normally work at normal speed. Yeah, this is a little too crumbly. Make them a little bit fatter. So you wanna get it right on the first bake. Do not try to remedy a mistake, and if you do, that's fine. They're still edible, but you're not going to want to sell them. And I would argue that this is an expensive recipe. Between the chocolate, the cocoa powder, the almond powder, and the butter, it's not inexpensive. So you want to be aware. That's why working in grams will give you the ability to definitely alter this recipe so that you get it very, very small, which I recommend doing. So these are crumbly. You can still see they're wetter on the inside than the edges. So I'm just gonna stack these here. These will get a shorter time in the oven drying. I'm actually gonna go put them in so that these will be done. And a crumbly, like this is so crumbly, that is a sign that's not good. So when you're slicing your biscotti to go into the oven, a sign of quality work is not that it's crumbly like this. It's not a good sign. And then we're gonna have some fun dipping. These are gonna go in the oven just to dry them out while the other ones are in there. I think they're gonna dry out pretty fast. And then we're gonna make the ones that I just finished baking. We're gonna make them look pretty. I'm gonna put these on the top shelf. Now we are just at 300 degrees, so that's good. And I have the timer set, it's at 16 minutes. So here's what we're going to do. I have candy melts in white, or you can just do chocolate. You don't have to do any dipping. It's a very American thing to do, is to dip. And these are sprinkles, little chocolate sprinkles we'll put here, and we'll do a little zhuzhing up. But you definitely don't have to. But if you do these as any kind of holiday, whatever the theme is, it could be for baby showers, birthdays, whatever someone's favorite colors are. You could also do a drizzle. So we're gonna dip, and you'll see these are still pretty warm. I'm gonna put them here, and this will go in the microwave for 45 seconds. And then I'll stir and I'll do 15-second blasts, as always. And they're candy melts, not chocolate. Again, I didn't want to throw a lot of money at this recipe. A simple plain biscotti that is traditional might have dried fruit in it. It might have chocolate, but it typically won't be dipped. It's a little bit more of an American zhuzhing up, decorating, a little over the top. But on the other hand, it's fun and it looks pretty. And if you can give something a little bit of excitement, I think it'll make people happy. And I'll show you the different ways that we do this. Now, the last time I used these candy melts, they were colored blue. And a lot of times that means that they just act differently. So I did not buy color, I bought just the white. Now hopefully I won't have a problem. So I'm gonna do a 15-second blast. The candy melts are by Merkins, and you can get these readily available on Amazon. But I am not a big fan of them. And I also am not a fan of the Wilton. There are a lot that I don't like. But when I was buying large bags, 25-pound boxes, I looked for the kind that had a more flowing ability, less viscous, more flowy. Now you can always add the fat crystals, the Paramount crystals, but you shouldn't have to. So unfortunately, it's a bit of a trial and error, but to get a really good brand, you need more, and I don't need 25 pounds sitting in the house. If you scorch this, it has to go. You cannot use it. But these are melting nicely. I think that the coloring changes them quite a bit. And I don't like food coloring anyway. I did like the blue cookies I did at the holidays, the ice blue snowflakes. But there's a price you pay. There's always a good and a bad. So I would rather stick with natural occurring colors. Like even the chocolate sprinkles will look nice. And candy melts aren't naturally occurring anyway. So they're not made with the same thing that a white chocolate is. There's no cocoa butter in here. It's all lecithin and palm kernel oils and hydrogenated cottonseed oils, you know, dry milk, fatty acids, lecithin, artificial. It's not good for you. But I use them because they are inexpensive. If I want to do something like this and I'm playing and experimenting, I'm not using very expensive chocolate. All right, so I would say this is good. You don't need to get every lump out, but you need to make sure this doesn't re-solidify. It's cold, so if you put it down, the bottom will start to get cold. So I'm going to use cork right here. I'm going to put one glove on and I'm going to show you just how easy this is. I'm right-handed. I always like to get set up at however works best for the flow. Keep a nice clean bowl. All right, so I'm going to, you can do one of two things. You could dip the whole side or just the bottom. I am going to dip the bottom. And what you want to do is dip, 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 pull, let it hang like this. You don't want it too thick, too thin. And then I'm just gonna make a foot. and put it right here. You do a couple. Dip, 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 pull. We don't want a huge foot, which means when you set it down, it just all falls to the bottom and gets like that, a flange. It creates a foot. Dip, 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 pull. And crumbs will get in this. The other way you could do these sprinkles is just to do this so it's a little bit of a lighter effect. And these will not take long to set up. Dip, 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 pull. And this is how you do any chocolate. The physics of it helps it pull back in. And I don't always like dipping the sprinkles. I think that they get too heavy and they do pull. So now I will work a little bit quicker. Dip, 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 dip. And then I'll do a couple full sides. Dip, dip, pull. You always want the same pull off on your bowl. Don't create a bunch of different areas. You want to contain the chaos, the mess. Dip, 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 dip. And I usually do make these a lot bigger, so this is a small. I'm going to take this side like so. Tap, tap, lift, scrape, dip. Obviously, if you make these a little bit thicker, it'll look a little bit dramatic. You don't have to do any of this. You can leave them plain. They're absolutely gorgeous. Leave a couple of them plain. Those are the butts. We'll do this one anyway. This one has an ugly end, so let's see if we can fix it. Yep. There's like a little nugget, a little broken part. There are no rules. If any of you have ever dipped pretzels, it's really no different. Depending on what your audience is, you get as fancy or as rustic and simple and fun. Kids can do this, doesn't have to be perfect. This is a butt. Okay. And one for me. Let's go. Here's what we do with our candy melt or any chocolate so we don't waste it. Instead of leaving it in the bowl, take a parchment. And I could run this through a sieve. It goes onto a parchment. And when it cools, I can break it up and put it into a deli cup and label it and re-melt it and use it later. Yeah, it's just gritty. This goes on a tray. It will solidify very quickly. That's it. Close these. And we still have stuff in the oven, so we'll keep an eye on that. Woo! We are making biscotti. I made it, I zhuzhed it up, but I like plain biscotti. I'm gonna show you here. These aren't completely solid, but almost. Here's my tray of chocolate biscotti that I have dipped. Dave, I think if you want your hot tea, you should make it. I scaled out all that herbal tea. So like I dipped half. The bottom half, and then and these aren't solidified completely. Or, look, a little hot tea. I'll just take that part. So go ahead and steep it. Well, don't you want to wait for the tea? Or no? Come pick it out. Come get on.
I thought you had like a scrap maybe. Give me a small one.
No, you don't have to have a scrap. You can have whatever one you want. Let's go take a look at our biscotti. All right, 2 minutes, that's the rule. Be careful. All right, so let's look. I see a tiny bit of shine, but it could be a nope, they're too soft. One back in. We're gonna give them 15 minutes. I'm not gonna turn up the oven. Remember what I said about we're not gonna rush. We're gonna use a nice temperature to keep things in check. Okay, so right now my oven is set at 300, and I know that because it's not set at 300, but the thermometer tells me that the inside of the oven is 300. So when you bake it, 350 Fahrenheit, 300 for drying it out. First of all, how do you know if you've baked it too crunchy but not burnt? Well, you'll know. You'll smell and you'll see. And with practice, what I would do is there is no reason I have to put a whole tray in. Do one at a time. Dial in the time, dial it in. Learn. You want it, and I have in my notes some signs of doneness. You want it, it smells a certain way and it has a nice color to it, but it is not overly dark. It shouldn't be overly dry. So when you touch it and put your little fingernail, it should give a little bit, but not a lot. Like right now, it was still really soft. Yeah, so the second bake. Bake until fully dry, flip once halfway through and then reduce the temperature rather than forcing the color. And believe it or not, the moisture in there that I spoke about is inside of the biscotti, and as it bakes, the moisture has to release. That's why you have to create enough air cells to let the moisture out. But then it equilibrates. The equilibrium for the moisture sort of settles in over the next 12 to 24 hours. So as it cools overnight, it's gonna do its thing. So I'm not gonna wrap these up until they're done. Looks like Dave's bringing the tea. Let me grab one of these. You see it? And it shouldn't necessarily bend, but it shouldn't shatter. And these, I'm telling you, these were underbaked to start. So there's the inside. You can see that there is, well, that's a chocolate chip. Let me see if it's hard. These are a little too hard. Thank you. You want a dunkable one? Yeah. I feel like I have chocolate everywhere.
What makes it dunkable?
You know how some things dissolve they'll just dissolve in the cup? These won't do that, but these are too dry. Dave does not like too dry of a
I don't mind, yeah.
biscotti, and I don't blame him. And I personally, I don't want all this stuff on here when I'm dipping it into my tea.
Enjoy, the tea is so good.
But that is nice. Yeah, these aren't too crunchy. They should be softer. But what I have to tell you is that is why literally rushing anything, going fast, hurrying, it doesn't serve you. It makes everything not good. So if I had a bag, I could put these in a box or a bag like this way, and tie it with a ribbon. You can make these really small so they go in a little demi-tasse of espresso, or you can make them really long so they look pretty across your plate. So you could serve a little plate with your cup on it and then your biscotti next to it. These are the biscotti. They will last a long time as long as the ambient humidity and room temperature are good. And we have some more in the oven, so hopefully they'll be a little bit softer. Yeah, they're in the oven and they shouldn't be crumbly or too dry. I'm gonna go check the cookies. I've never had these turn out too crunchy, so I was doing too many things. I went and took a shower while I had them in the oven. I was doing too much, as I always do. But they're good for dipping. Let's go check them out. They're still good though. And I'll tell you how they're overdone. They just taste a little too dark, a little not burnt, but you know, little edges of it that I don't enjoy. And you want to enjoy it. It should be tender on the tooth, but not soft. It should give. I think these need to be flipped over. And I can still get my fingernail in there just a little bit, but not a ton. I'm gonna flip these and then swap, and I'll show you. I'm gonna flip these over with tongs. And I'm gonna give these 10 minutes, because sometimes the first bake dries them out quite a bit. The second flip of the second bake does not need to be as long. I'm gonna give these 10 minutes and we're gonna pull them out, and I bet they're gonna be a little more forgiving. If you cut these thicker, then it's gonna take longer for them to dry out. 300-degree oven. All right, so I'm gonna do 10 minutes. I'm gonna do 11. And then we'll see if they're a little malleable, and then we'll move on. All right, I'm gonna dip this guy in here. I'm not a big fan of the chocolate and sprinkles. I like them thick, to be honest. If I were making them for myself, I do like them a little thick. It gives you a little more of that soft interior. But again, the test is when you dunk them, they should not dissolve into your drink. They should hold together, but you want to ride that line. And those should be good. Yeah, I'm going to pull these guys out. I'm not going to let them get too dark because they really will settle, and leave all yours out at room temperature overnight. Let them settle before you wrap them or take care of them tomorrow. Then you can judge them after they've sat overnight. Yeah, these look good. They're not glossy. And yep, just like I can't really get my fingernail in there, but you can feel it give just a little. So that's good.
Would you say it's like toast, where you want like the outside to kind of be dried out, but the inside of it is still.
It is an even distribution of the moisture where you want it to evaporate. It's even. It's an even distribution throughout. So it shouldn't be hard on the outside and soft in the middle. It should be,
Got it.
It should be an even bite all the way through.
That's why the low and slow.
Yes. And so, yeah. Ah, it's hot.
That looks great.
So yeah, these are cool. And these will be the ones Dave and I munch off of for a while. All right, everybody, have a good night. And I hope you have a good rest of your week. Happy baking. I hope that you try this biscotti. It's easy and delicious. Because a long time ago, what I wanted to do was go through all these books and try stuff. And now I'm like, let's just do it every week. Let's attach the recipe to the writer, to the developer. I think it's going to be amazing. All right, everyone, take care. See you.